Once again, we are following guidelines and ask that you wear your masks in your chairs, in your seats rather. If you're up here speaking and you feel as though you want to take it off, that's cool. But when you get back to your seats, put your masks on. We're following the guidelines, obviously, being safe. So thank you all for coming. I'm Brian Campstra, pastor of Spirit of God Fellowship. And on behalf of the Stromberg family, we want to welcome you to a long overdue memorial. Shar and Jason and Audrey, it's hard to lose a husband and a dad. And I know Doug is here, Jim is here. Dennis could not be with us, but brothers of Dave, it's hard to lose a brother and also your mother 4 days later. And I've shared this before, and it just I'm guilty of this. We mean well when we go to wakes and we say, he's in a better place. We've all said that. Yes, he is, but it doesn't help us down here. We miss him. You're going to miss him. But here's the good news. Dave has joined the great cloud of witnesses, right? The great crowd of witnesses, however you read it. And Dave is up there with a lot of folks that we know. And it seems in the last couple years, many have joined the ranks. And I remember the morning that Dave died, I was sleeping. My wife came in and said, oh, Dave died. And I thought, oh, no, not Dave. No. 62 years old. But you know what? God took Dave. Let's be clear. God's in control. And for whatever reason, he took him home. And see, Dave is in that crowd of witnesses with many others that we know, and they're cheering us on. Don't forget that. They're cheering us on. They're cheering you on. We need to finish our race strong, don't we? Because, see, we have a promise. The promise that we have is that we're going to see them again. Can I get an amen to that? I knew Dave over 40 years. And I'm sure you can all agree he was always encouraging, wasn't he? I don't think I ever was around him. Oh, Dave went through things in life like we all did, so we had ups and downs. But anytime I saw him, every time I was with him, he was always encouraging. He was always faithful. He's a faithful man. And always quietly serving. I'll bet you'll hear a lot of that as friends of his share. He was always serving. He wasn't looking for a lot of attention. We have some people that are going to share about that this morning or this afternoon, about the times that Dave served. And so we've gathered here this afternoon to remember. We've gathered here to share some memories. And we've gathered to celebrate. And I'm going to get out of the way because we've got a bunch of people that want to share this afternoon. And so what I'd like to do is call up Shar and Jason and Audrey, and we're going to have Shar begin, and then Jason, and then Audrey. Sorry, I know you'd like to get it out of the way first, but we're going to let your mom do it, and then you'll be after your brother Jason. So.
Thank you. My earring's in the way. Can you get this off? My earring. There we go. Okay. As Brian shared, Dave's mom passed 4 days later. After he passed away on Passover, and Pat, his mom, passed away on Easter. But it's because of his mom that I'm actually standing here in Spirit of God Fellowship. Because when I started dating Dave, that's where he brought me, he said, you gotta come to church with me on Wednesday night. Because we met on Wednesday nights. And we've been here since, well, he was here in 75. I started in 77 when I started with dating him. And he always said, yeah, Mom dragged us to Spirit of God, and, and we've been here ever since. Dave was very steadfast and very calm most of the time. He said I was the first girl he ever dated. And what's kind of funny is the first date we ever had was with his two younger brothers, Dennis and Jim, and his mother. We went to, in the station wagon, to see The Rescuers, which is a cartoon. It was great. And I had met him about 6 months before that, and I thought, oh, this is a very quiet, reserved type of guy. Yeah. That was funny. Because after he took them back home, we went to what was then open air River Oaks. And they had these little stone seats, different all over the place. And this shy, quiet guy started skipping and jumping over the stone seats. And I'm like, I'm going to have to get to know this guy. He's not who I thought he was. And I think a lot of us just, knew the quiet servant and the quiet, but it's like, yeah, that's not him. I got to know quite a bit about him. He had a sense of a wit. When I was dating, we were at his parents' house, and I sat between Doug and Dave at the dinner table, and the three of us just constant one-liners back and forth. It was so fun. But that was Dave, too. And a lot of people don't know Dave was an artist. He drew a face, and I wish he would have let me put little captions with the face, because it had different expressions on the face, and I think he could have done something with that. You may see on the table there's a cottage. He made that in high school. Be it on this one poster board, there's a cabinet. And the reason the cabinet's there is because when we were first married, we didn't have a place to put our dishes, because it was, it's a small place, apartment. He and his father made that cabinet. So take a look at it. But people didn't know that.
Still have it.
And we still have it. It's still being used. We were married. We would have been married 39 years this year. And he had been at his job almost 40 years. Because once we decided to get married, I was in college, it's like, let's have a year of working, and then we'll get married. And that's what we did. So, but and what he did was he drew on the computer, and he loved it. It was a dust collector. And he would, by now, when I happened to call to tell his coworker, who we kind of knew personally, that he had passed, he said, oh boy, because my husband, Dave, was the only one that knew some of the sketches from way past, and he had just gotten it put on digital for them. It's like he knew that something was coming up. There's some pictures there also of him being kind of silly. He loved his family, and he, did everything. We went on vacations. It was great. We both loved each other dearly. We were put together by God. It's the only thing I can say. But there's so many other stories that I would like to say, but There's pictures also of our wedding. And there's a picture of just him, and that's him watching me walk down the aisle, and he has this really neat look on his face when he's watching me come down the aisle. What else can I tell you about? He always liked to be here and to serve, and he did a lot of that. I started doing work at Pass Pregnancy Center here in South Holland with Mary Lou Duffy. And I moved on to just be an advocate. And when you're learning from Mary Lou Duffy, I was like, she would show me the file. She would go in and say, do you mind if she watches with what we talk about? And then she'd close the file and say, so, what's going on? And I'm like, I don't think I can do that. But that's what I do now. So I'm a manager now at this Pass. But what happened was I happened to join and started facilitating with Hope and Healing after I'd had a lot of healing from it. About a few years before that, we'd been in house church with fellowship and everything, and it's just something that we needed to break through. And so we went to Elijah House in Idaho, and I think I had more of a breakthrough than he did. But from there on, both of us grew in our relationship with the Lord. And I happened to go to Hope and Healing and really felt that I was getting even more healing. And I finally said to him, you need to come to Hope and Healing. He's like, okay. And so he went through Hope and Healing. You have to go through first before you become a facilitator. And a year after he had gone through, I said, so what do you think of Hope and Healing? He says, I should have done this earlier. But, he loved doing things. He would do things for me. He loved loving me by doing things for me. And yes, he was steadfast. A couple of things that happened that kind of show how calm he could be. When the kids were small, we were over here actually at a house babysitting, and the next door neighbor had a pool. And at the pool, they had a slide. Well, Dave was over with the kids in the pool, and our niece, Samantha, happened to slide down the slide, and just as she was about at the bottom, Dave turned around right at the slide, and she bit his forehead, and it bled. I didn't know anything about this until he came in the house holding the little lap of skin that was kind of almost falling off. And he has blood running down his arm. And he said, I think I need a Band-Aid. And I'm like, dear, you need more than a Band-Aid. You need stitches. And he's like, no. I'm like, I took him in the bathroom. We started to clean him off. He said, yeah, maybe I need a few stitches. I'm like, what? There was going to be, did Eddie's Dropbox?
Eddie did the.
Okay.
Right.
I'm going to let Eddie tell the story, but he had a nosebleed, and the same thing kind of happened where he walks over to where Eddie worked for under him because he was manager, and he said, can you take care of the bathroom? I got a nosebleed. And yeah, I'll let Eddie tell the rest. But it's, again, he was just, calm. Or he had, when we had the surgery for the colostomy with the problem he had with the diverticulitis, they had to take part of his colon. And he calls me and he says, Jason took me to the hospital and they're probably going to do emergency surgery. He wasn't like, I'm going to have surgery. It's like, I'm going to have surgery in about an hour and a half. And I'm like, oh, great. Because I was out taking Audrey, our daughter, back to San Diego, where she was doing her Navy stuff. So I flew back the next day, and they said, no, we decided to, so, but it was like, it wasn't a big deal. He's just like, oh, yeah, I'm going to have surgery, emergency surgery. And I was like, okay. But that was him. He was very low-key. Yes, he did get upset a few times, but it wasn't a big deal. He would settle down, and he learned how to deal with his anger very early, I think. So, yeah, I miss him dearly, with almost 39 years, yeah. He was my best friend. And that's all I can say. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. On top of that, the last one she said, I come home from work and he's like, you're taking me to the hospital. Just calm. You're taking me to the hospital. I'm like, okay. So we go to the hospital and he calls mom. He liked to got started hunting with Kendall when while I was in the Air Force. And part of the hunting was putting tree stands out in the trees, and Kendall would be in one, and my dad would be in another. He had said, he had written, this little piece of paper right here, it basically explains that. Sheesh. Today I was sitting in a tree waiting for something to come along, basically a deer. Off to my right, I catch a glimpse of 2 bucks. One is coming my way, and my bow is on the hook. If I move, I know he will see me, but I reach for the bow anyway. I'm almost ready, and there he is standing in front of me. He is looking at me, and I at him, and I just stand there looking. He then walks off to my left where I don't have a clear shot. The other buck goes into the corn to eat and goes out the same way he went. He was about 40 yards out. After the buck walked off, I started thinking about why I didn't take the shot. He was a beautiful animal, and I got a mental image of God taking great joy in creating him. The next thought to come was, if God felt that way about a deer, how much more joy did he feel about creating me and loving me? After a little bit, still thinking about what God had just showed me, I checked my email, and I see there's one from the Ombudsman of...
Ombudsman.
What the heck is that?
It's a civilian of one of the wives of one of the higher ranking person on a ship who kind of communicates between the families and the ship. So when we pull in or pull out, or if we're getting delayed, that person would contact the families of those people and let them know what is going on.
Okay.
That's pretty much what he's writing about there.
He sees an email for one of the ombudsmen for Audrey's ship, who is passing along an email from the captain. He basically says that they will start heading home in a couple of weeks, and about the Thanksgiving they are planning on ship. Tears came to my eyes as I thought about Audrey finally coming home. I text Kendall, who is in another tree in another area, about the captain's email, and finish with, "God is so good." Kendall responds, "Yeah, and you are in it, and you are his son.
Yes,
You are his son." Texting. It then clicks about what God was showing me, and I begin to weep. I am feeling God's love for the first time in my life. As I'm weeping, I think about the Father's love for his son, who is finally coming home. And that's basically what touched him that day. Dad growing up, as I was growing up, was, as Brian said, it wasn't encouraging. He always said I had a bright mind, although I don't see it much. But
Okay.
because of my father, I've always I started with camera work at here at Spirit of God Fellowship. He taught me everything I know about getting shots and camera work, and got my first job doing at the South Holland Public Access Studio, of which he was friends with the guy that runs the place, and basically talked about me and things like that. And I got my first job doing video work because of him. Also because of him, I'd taken the ASVAB at school. But he said if ever he saw me in the military, it would be the Air Force. And so I joined the Air Force. I loaded bombs and missiles on B-52s, F-16s, and MQ-1s. And coming home, I would eat, coming to church on Wednesday nights, there would be always someone coming over saying, "Hey, you're Dave's son." I'm like, "Yes." And they would introduce themselves, so. Because mom and dad would always brag about me and my sister. So, who knew? Thanks, Audrey. No, I don't. He always encouraged me to do things, and he was really encouraging. He'd always take me to help out with the church, break down the chairs, and we would always come 15 minutes early just to be here so we could do it. And I've been coming early 15 minutes a lot because of my dad. So it's just a habit that he instilled in me to do, and I'm gonna miss him. So, thanks.
Hello, I'm Audrey, for those who don't know. As always, since I'm the youngest, I go last. That's what it was for a lot of my childhood. Not that it was ever intentional or, to be demeaning or anything about it. It was just, well, she's the youngest, she can be last. That's no worries. It was always funny. It was a great, fun family time, but that was Dad. We always had fun no matter what we were doing. With all our vacations, with all of the things that we would, board games, going out to eat, no matter what, we would always have fun. We would always like to argue back and forth between me and Dad, just yes, no, drive my mother nuts, and we wouldn't stop until she told us to stop. And there was a few times where we'd be like, she's gonna yell at us to stop if we don't stop, but we just kept going until she told us, "That's enough, guys."
Or gave you the look.
Or just went in the other room. One of the two, but that was me and my dad. Since I am a second-born, I got double trouble out of everything, so, second-borns always like to be the mischievous ones. But he always liked to do a lot of rearranging of things.
What I forgot.
he liked to cause a lot of change, especially in our house, especially rearranging furniture and rearranging things in the kitchen of where, the pots and pans would be to where the Tupperware would be and everything else. And sometimes you come home and be like, so what did Dad rearrange today? Because I swear it would change like every year. I don't remember that house being the same more than a couple of years in a row, but that was Dad. He literally taught us about change every single time. And the thing about change, I believe, is I've come to learn that change is neither good or bad. Change is neutral and inevitable. It's the circumstances that are good or bad that cause the change, but how you deal with it is what makes you, forces you to either become a better person or go down a deeper hole than where you were before. And I think this is, for change, you either run from it or you embrace it. And most of us, I would hope, like to embrace change because that makes us grow. And if we don't grow, then we are being stuck in God. God loves it when his children grow. And that's what Dad taught.
Amen.
And I think the hardest change we've had to embrace is his passing. I'd be lying if I said these last 4 months were easy, but sorry, excuse me. When I came home, I was only home a week before he went into the hospital. And since we thought he had COVID, we were told to, social distance as much as possible. And, well, we didn't really see eye to eye on a lot of things the last year or so. And the last time I was home was 9 months before that, so I wasn't even home 2 weeks before he passed, so it's been a little tough. But I thank everyone for their prayers and their support during this time, because we couldn't have done it without all of you. All the dinners, the prayers, the conversations sometimes, and that has really helped. But yes, I'm going to miss him as well.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Oops, yep, thanks. I appreciate you sharing that story. Jason, I think Dave actually shared that on a Wednesday or a Sunday or something. I remember that story. What a great story. So, Kendall, you just remember that email when you're out there hunting. You know what I'm saying. Anyway, we won't touch that. So I'd like to have two more people that knew Dave very, very well through PASS. And, of course, Dave was a volunteer. So I'd like to have Lawrence Grott come up, and then Susan Wilson. Susan is the Director of Operations at PASS. We've seen her quite a bit at Spirit of God, and so they'd like to share a couple memories.
The story that you told, Dave and the deer stand, he actually told that at Hope and Healing Group. So when you said that, I'm like, I remember that story just like he told it yesterday. So I'm already stuttering, and so that's why I actually wrote down what I want to say. Dave meant a lot to me. When I came to pass to Hope and Healing, Susan actually invited me, and Shar was the facilitator of the group that I went through so that I could start facilitating, and then I was the facilitator when Dave went through it. And so that's that's where I got to know Dave. And so I'd just like to read some things that I put together this week while I was just thinking about who he was and what he meant to me. So by the time Dave joined us at PASS, I had already volunteered with Shar for 2 years. Right off the bat, Dave and I were assigned to co-facilitate together, and I took an immediate liking to him. You can ask Susan if I'm telling you the truth on this, but I would always subtly try to orchestrate Dave and I co-facilitating together from that moment on. And by the way, I was the only one that thought I was being subtle about it. While I never told Dave that I would go to Susan ahead of time prior to every 12-week class, I don't believe for 1 second that it was a best-kept secret. Dave was a good man, and I really valued the time that I was gifted to get to know him and the time that I got to spend with him. While Dave was with us, he had an assignment. He was first and foremost a man of God, and I think everybody in here knows that. He was a husband, a father, and he was a friend. But he's with the Lord now, and because of that, he has a new assignment. He's not idly lying around on a cloud with wings on his back playing a harp, although with God's help, I'm sure he would be good at it. We all have probably heard or even said this as an adult to comfort a child over the loss of a loved one. The reason God took them was because he needed them in heaven more than he needed them here on earth. As I was praying this week and going to God's Word in preparation for what I wanted to say today, I found out that that's actually scriptural. Why is Dave no longer with us? Because of the new assignment that God gave him. Dave is in basic training, and he is suiting up for his assignment. Even as we gather here today to remember him, we will see him again, and he will be recognizable, and we'll even know what he's wearing. In Revelation chapter 19, verse 24, it says, "And the armies in heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses." God needed Dave in that army of the Lord Jesus Christ. Some of us are here today, some of us that are here today will be a part of that army, side by side with Dave. Some of us may be here on the earth when that army comes with Jesus Christ and establish his reign for 1,000 years. Shar, you were married to Dave for 39 years, but it's not just 39 years. It's 39 years plus 1,000 years, and then eternity. I want you and your family to know that I've prayed for God's comfort and peace to cover you in this time several times, and I continue to do so. I know God will continue to bless you and your family, and I am truly honored to be able to have the opportunity to just share some of these things with you about Dave today. Thank you.
It's interesting. Everybody talks about Dave's sense of humor, but I'm going to talk to you about the serious Dave. His wife had gone through Hope and Healing, and then he had a subtle way of saying to me, maybe you should consider talking to Audrey about doing Hope and Healing. So there was something about Dave that when he kind of explained it, I kind of took it to heart. So Audrey did do Hope and Healing. And then one day I said to him, Dave, maybe you should go to Hope and Healing. And then he didn't talk to me for a couple weeks. And then I thought, wow, well, that's kind of interesting, Lord. We kind of have this serious kind of relationship. So he did do Hope and Healing. And then he said, yeah, it was pretty good. And I said, so do you think you'd ever consider being a facilitator? I'll have to think about it. He thought about it, and he came back as a facilitator. And our conversations were always very deep because, you know, as coordinating the Hope and Healing program, you kind of have to be open to your facilitators and what they have to say. But Dave would go, you know, I was looking at this page here. Do you think you could maybe change? Sure, Dave, I can do that. And so we really just had this, I don't know, E.F. Hutton kind of relationship in a strange way. Whenever he said something, I listened and I did it. And he, well, quite frankly, was always right. And I just appreciate that about Dave, that he genuinely cared deeply for Shar, for Jason, and for Audrey. And he loved you guys so much. And he desired that you would each be your own individual, that you would stand up and be all that you're called to be. And I think that that's what I learned from Dave, is just own your own identity. Whatever it is, it's a gift from God, and he wants you to walk out the you that you are. And so I just know that we're blessed at PASS to have the Stromberg family involved with us. I'm excited that Shar is our new center manager at South Holland. It's interesting because now, July and August, I've been at South Holland, and when I come to Spirit of God, I cannot come to Spirit of God and not think of Mary Lou Duffy and of Jim Duffy, and I just think that there is so much power that comes out of this congregation that I just have to say to you, Brian, that there's something about Spirit of God that cares about community and about life and about the purpose that God has for each one of us. And for that, I am grateful to know Dave and what he stands for. And last night was honored to be at your mother's memorial service, and I realized that gentle, quiet spirit came from his mother. And I am just very grateful to have the privilege to know him. So God bless you guys.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Lawrence. We've been together with Dave for over 40 years, actually, I think, at Spirit of God Fellowship. So we've had a lot of time before the presence of God and singing and fellowshipping. And so Dave's favorite song, or one of his absolute favorite songs, was The Stand. It was that song by Hillsong. So if you can stand this afternoon, great, and join us in singing. We're going to just play the video. It's a video that has the words on it. This was Dave's song. He's standing in the presence right now singing this song. So Paul, if you don't mind playing that, if you can stand with us and sing, great. If you'd like, if you can't, that's okay. Just stay seated, but sing along with us if you don't mind.
You stood before creation, forever within your hand. You spoke all life into motion, my soul now to stand. And you stood before my failure and carried the cross for my shame. My sin weighed upon your shoulder, my soul now to stand. So what can I say? And what can I do but offer this heart, oh God, completely to you? So I'll walk upon salvation, your spirit alive in me, my life to declare your promise, my soul now to stand. So what can I say? And what can I do but offer this heart, oh God, completely to you? So what can I say? And what can I do but offer this heart, oh God, completely to you? So I'll stand with arms high and heart abandoned in awe of the one who gave it all. I'll stand, my soul, Lord, to you surrendered. All I am is yours. So I'll stand with arms high and heart abandoned in awe of the one who gave it all. I'll stand, my soul, Lord, to you surrendered. All I am is yours. All I am is yours. All I am is yours.
Oh, amen. What a great song. And so, Paul, if you don't mind queuing up the Dropbox, we Doug and Doug, the brother of Dave and Madeline, is here. Doug and Madeline, one of their children, Stephen, and I believe Stephen spent some time living with you guys. Oh, it was Jim. I'm sorry. I apologize. So many kids you guys have, right? I get it all, get confused. Yeah, but no, Stephen, one of Doug and Madeline's children, he has put a video in Dropbox, and then also Eddie. Eddie is a co-worker with Dave. So go ahead, Paul, if you don't mind playing them.
Uncle David. He was a very special type of Stromberg. It was so strange. He was within the paradigm of what is a Stromberg, but he was also aware of it. We have this sense of humor, this dry wit, and, you know, sometimes I'm guilty as anyone else. Other times, you know, it was like, you know, especially being away for so long, I would come back and it would be like witnessing from an outside perspective. And Uncle David, self-ironically, was more than happy to continue the trend. He would make bad jokes because he knew they were bad, and he would revel in them. I would always see that gleam in his eye, that smirk, that you know, the it's so bad it's good kind of thing, and I love that. I also loved how warm and welcoming he always was. How his house was always open, how his household, you know, how all of you at your house, you know, Aunt Charlene, Audrey, Jason, you all were always ready and willing to accommodate and hang out, you know, not necessarily do anything particularly, you know, just hang out. And that was so important to me growing up and as an adult. And as I grew up, my perspective on his demeanor, my appreciation for it, of course, grew. I miss him so much, yeah, I know he is, you know, somewhere where none of these earthly ailments can touch him. And I look forward to hearing his self-ironic, dry, cheesy jokes once again, and to see that smirk and that look in his eyes where he knows just how bad the joke was. Yet how good. I miss all of you, and I can't wait to be able to finish my morning when I can finally embrace you all, and then turn from mourning to celebration and continuing on this blessing that God has given us, this life. I'll see you all in a couple months, hopefully.
Hi, my name is Eddie Castro, and I had the great opportunity to meet and work alongside Dave Stromberg. We shared an office together, and in that time, we that we spent together at work. We had phenomenal conversations, learned a lot from him. He was a man that, if you listened, he was willing to teach. And one of the stories I wanted to share with you was the time when Dave and I were working, and he walked out of the office, comes back a few minutes later, and he's holding his nose, and he says, "Eddie, I need you to call 911. I said, "Why? What's wrong?" He said, "I can't get my nose to stop bleeding." So I said, "Oh man, hold on." So I called 911, and as we're waiting for the ambulance to arrive, he says, "Can you go make sure that the bathroom is clean?" How bad can it be? It's a nosebleed. I walk in, and it looked like a crime scene. And this man had blood everywhere. So I cleaned it up, went back to the office. The ambulance arrived. They took him to the hospital. And I asked the manager at the time if I could go with and see how he was doing. And he allowed me to go. And when I get there, the one of the doctors tells me that only family was allowed to see him, and asked if I was related to Dave Stromberg. And I said, yes, I am. He said, what is your relations to Dave? I said, I'm his son. The guy looked at me kind of weird, didn't question it, didn't really say anything, but he had a weird look in his eyes. I said, really? His son? But he let me in anyways. So I walk in, and as I walk in, I see him on the hospital bed, and I say, hey, Dad. And he looked kind of lost too, and I looked at Cheryl, and she said, and I said, hey, Mom. And then, the nurse, the doctor walked out, and he still looked lost, and I said, well, the only way they would let me in is if I tell them I'm your son. And he goes, well, son, I'm okay. Dave, he was a loving man, a loving father, an amazing friend, great boss, someone that I admire, someone that I looked up to. I mean, this man, he's a God-fearing man, and I miss him. I really do, and I miss him. One day we will be together. But until then, he's in my heart, in my thoughts. His family's in my prayers. And yeah, I mean, that's just one of many stories that we shared, and apart from him, being sick, he always put other people first. He always thought of others before himself, and he was always worried about others and how others were doing, and he's just a loving man, and I truly miss him. There's many more stories that him and I will share or have shared, but I will leave you with that. Again, I love you guys, and thank you for allowing me to be part of your family.
That was great. That was just one of many stories. Oh, I can't wait to hear some of the others. I'm sure. Wow, that was great. Is that your oldest boy that just shared, or no? Stephen. Number 4. Okay. Don't you love modern technology? I'm so glad that we could have Stephen and Eddie share. We just have 2 more people that want to share. Kendall Miller, Dave's longtime Christian brother, hunting friend, and long relationship. Kendall's going to share, and then certainly last but not least in closing this time will be Dennis, Dave's brother. It would be Doug. See, Doug, you haven't been around for a while. I'm 63 now, as you can tell. Sorry about that. As are you.
Well, Dave was surprising as a human. I think I hear in a lot of, even Char's early stories, it's like, for those of us who really got to know him, at each point, there was a different aspect of who he was that would come along and take you by surprise, and you go, I did not see this coming. I thought I knew who this person was. And I got to know Dave. We moved up here in 2005, and I got to immediately get to know him and spend time with him on the video crew with Jason and some of the family. And I spent a good bit of time with him, and one day he came up to me and said, hey, I know you like to bow hunt. Could you teach me? And I could not have picked a more unlikely candidate to teach how to bow hunt. I was like, you've been in the city your whole life. Have you ever been in the woods? And I don't, as Dave would do, I don't know whether he was genuinely interested more in bow hunting or trying to find ways to spend time with me. And I don't really care. I'm just glad that he took that initiative because it launched us on a 6-year journey together where we got to spend time in the woods, and I got to know him in a completely different way. If you want to get to know someone, go out into nature, get into the woods, spend 6 hours a day on a tree 20 feet in the air together. And as I was thinking about who Dave was, there's aspects of who I got to see him become as an outdoorsman and an adventure. I saw an adventuresome spirit that was in him that I never knew existed until I got to meet him. But I watched him strap 60 pounds of gear and hike for an hour. We got lost. We crawled through briars. We explored a lot of the woods in Illinois and Indiana together, and there's aspects of who he taught me he was that I see that I would like to share with you. And part of being a hunter is mastering the fundamentals. There's things that you have to be good at, that you have to master before you can do something else. And Dave had really mastered some fundamentals. Some of the things that were really important to him is I watched him over and over and over again prioritize people, whether it was family, whether it was guys in Harvey House. I would throw out invites to do things all the time. And without fail, Dave Stromberg would be one of the first people to, yeah, I'll do that. You want to go do this? Yeah, I'll do that. I'll be there. We'll do that. And he prioritized a friendship and a relationship with me that was really rare. Another aspect of being a bow hunter is you have to be good at follow through. When you're shooting, there's a form, and if you don't follow through, you won't hit your mark. And Dave was good at follow through. I watched him. If he said he was going to be somewhere and he committed to it, he would be there. Whether it was serving here, whether it was, hey, Paul would say we need to be here for kids' church at some ungodly hour in the morning, and Dave was always here in front of me, had his coffee ready to go. It didn't matter what the ask was, but if he gave you his word, he was gonna follow through on it. Another thing as a bow hunter is you've got to be able to be still. And you've got to be able to tune your ear and be able to listen. And in my experiences with Dave, I always felt heard, no matter what the topic of conversation was about, whether we had agreed or disagreed. And we had a lot of conversations, a lot of hours driving in a vehicle. And he would listen. And he was very contemplative. He would sit and you could tell he was thinking, mulling. And I always felt valued, and I always felt heard in a relationship with Dave. Another thing about being a bow hunter is you need a good sense of humor. You need to be able to laugh at yourself. And for fear of incriminating both of us, I won't share any stories. Dave's humor has been set up, and suffice it to say, Dave thought he had a great sense of humor. To which the rest of us would say, yes, Dave, you definitely had a sense of humor. And it was this dry, witty, sarcastic, punny humor that we all appreciated. And you could just count on it being the right, eye-twitching comment at the right moment that we could all appreciate so well. Yes, absolutely. It always did fit. And then fundamentally, also being a sportsman, being outdoors is about friendship and camaraderie. And one of the things Dave also did really well is he was vulnerable. And I watched him model that and share that in multiple settings, in context with some of our men's meetings, with things that he shared. And then definitely in my friendship with him. And I think one of the greatest things that we can give another human is to give them the gift of letting somebody else in to get to know you, to know and be known. is what it means to be a friend. And Dave embodied that, and it was one of my deepest friendships, and I thank him for that. The day that I heard the news that he had passed away, I'm first of all, I'm very grateful for this context being in Mississippi. I didn't think that there would be an opportunity to come be with you guys, be with family, and celebrate Dave's life. So we went out and we did some geocaches. I wanted something adventuresome to do to remind me of Dave, and we signed all of the log books in South Mississippi in memory of Dave Stromberg. So Dave, thank you. I appreciate your friendship and sharing your life.
Come on up, Doug. You've got the final word.
Up until this weekend, I didn't realize how large my family was. Last night, I found out that my mother has adopted a lot of people. And so I've got a lot more brothers and sisters than I thought I did. And now I find out that I've got a nephew, another nephew. For me, David was one of those life-changing events in my life. Up until he came along, I was about a year and a half old. I had the place to myself. And then David was born, and all of a sudden it's like I've got to share this space with somebody else. He became a lifelong companion. When we were children, we managed to get into a lot of trouble and figure out ways, oftentimes, to get that blamed on either Dennis or Jim. But we had a lot of good times together. We had a tree in the backyard in Roseland on the south side of Chicago that was just perfect for climbing. To this day, I don't think my mom knows that we managed to get up on top of the roof of the garage from that tree. But we did. It was our fort. Later on, we tried to build a fort out in South Holland. We were the first house on the block, and one day, lo and behold, they poured a foundation across the street and taken all of the forms from the foundation and just laid them there on the pavement and left them there. And they'd been there for some time that we could tell, and we thought, well, if they don't want them anymore, we can certainly make use of them in the backyard. So we started hauling them into our backyard and nailing them together to make a fort. They came along later on to reclaim them. So David was born in, 1957? And he and I were both born again as we were teenagers in the early 70s. We had the benefit of my mom having become a born-again Christian in the late 1960s. And her encouragement. We had the benefit of one of my dad's cousins who, as a Seventh-day Adventist, thought it his responsibility to tell everybody that they needed to be born again, and he wouldn't stop, much to the chagrin of his mom. But one of the things he kept on wanting to talk to us about was the Word that became flesh and dwelt among us. We also have the benefit of growing up in a Lutheran church where, unlike many people who become Christians as adults, just out of nowhere, not having a church background, the Lutheran church went through the gospel every single Sunday morning. The liturgy that they would follow, I'm sure to some degree they still do, really explained the gospel message in great detail, so that when you sing a song like I'll Stand, and some of what it's talking about, realizing that sin had separated us from God, and that he would not rest. There was nothing he would not do to bring us near to him again, including shedding his blood on the cross. Those are the kinds of things that we kind of grew up hearing, not quite understanding, but hearing, so that when it clicked as young adults, it really clicked. That message. I miss David. I miss David very much, especially in this day and age right now where we have quite a task ahead of us to gather in the harvest, which I think is something that's going to be happening before too long, a great harvest. When you look at the growing season of any given year, produce is brought in throughout the year. Early in the year, usually it's things like berries, very sweet and delicious. But the volume of the berries at the beginning of the year is nothing compared to along the end of August, early September, you start bringing in things like nectarines and apples in tremendous volume. And later on, beyond that, you start bringing in wheat and corn in humongous volumes where you've got to have huge storehouses to store it all in to get ready to use it. I think we're coming up to the end of the growing season, and I wish my brother was here to help bring it in. But he's looking down on us. He and all the rest of those that have gone before us are watching over us as well with great expectation to see us all again. And I think it's not going to be too much longer before we do. So my prayer right now is for all of us to realize the task ahead of us, to pick up the ball that has been passed to us from people like David, to reach out to the people around us with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Thank you all for coming and celebrating his life.
Thank you, Doug. So, Paul, get that song queued up. And Dave's favorite song was a song by David Meese called "I Can See." We're going to play that song as we exit. Jeff and Greg, you guys are back there. Again, we want to be compliant. We want to be sensitive to guidelines. So we would ask that you do not congregate in the building or in the foyer back there. But as you're dismissed, we're going to dismiss you one row at a time from the back first, all the way up to here. Again, we're going to be playing that song, so it's Dave's favorite song. Feel free to listen. And Jeff and Greg are back there. They will dismiss you one row at a time, but please do not congregate anywhere here or in the back there. The family, of course, has a special time together after we're finished. But I've experienced loss. My wife and I have experienced loss in the last year or two. Many here this morning, we've experienced loss. I've said this verse 1,000 times. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted. He really is. Jesus said, blessed are those that mourn, for they will be what? Comforted. So go with that in mind. And our comfort is the promise that those that know Jesus as their personal Savior, and without a shadow of a doubt, David knew the Lord as his Savior. And David is now absent from the body, present with the Lord. And that's how we leave here this afternoon. God bless you. Thank you so much for coming. Continue to remember the family in prayer. Paul, go ahead and cue that song, and then we'll dismiss you one row at a time, starting in the back.